Chapter 1 It was a nice and sunny morning when El Elowin went out to get firewood for the evening. At the age of 17, he was a hard worker. It has been 4 long years since his parents died, but he learned to look after himself and the people who felt like family to him. When he was 13, El Elowin found the home of the forest elves, looking for a place to live, and for people to give him love and happiness. They kindly took him in, and raised him as one of their own. They taught him how to communicate with the forest spirits and how to use magic. As a sacred custom, the elven monarch nicknamed El Elowin after a long line of elven warriors. El Elowin had a connection with all the elves in the village, but the one he trusted more than anyone else was his best friend Radian. She was the first elf to greet him when he stumbled upon their home. They quickly became close friends after El Elowin's first month in the elven forest. The elves called their forest home Daisfe, which in the elven language means eternal. El Elowin was on his way back to the elven village when he spotted Radian near a tree with strange-looking branches. He slowly walked up to her and watched as she was reciting an ancient forest spell. As he was watching, he noticed the tree's branches were twisting around each other. When the spell was done, Radian turned around and saw El Elowin staring at her. "What does it take for you to get a little attention?" El Elowin joked. She looked at him with her tender green eyes. Of all the traits El Elowin liked about Radian, it was her eyes that fascinated him. "What can I say? I'm a show stealer. I like being the center of attention." She looked at the firewood he was holding and smiled. "You know, you can always let the highly trained elves collect the firewood. Don't let all of the hard work stress you out." El Elowin was always eager to help anyone who needed it, but maybe he deserved a break from it all. "Maybe you're right," El Elowin said. "It's just that ever since my parents died, I've been helping people left and right. I never wanted to see anyone depressed and feel left alone in the world." Radian patted him on the shoulder and said, "We should start heading back. The royal guards are scouting the perimeter, and I'm sure that my father wouldn't want me out here far from the village after dark." When they returned to the village, the king of the elves, Duilvel, was talking with one of the guards. "We have men securing the area as we speak, your highness," said the guard. "Very good," said King Duilvel. "There is going to be a big occasion in the village square tonight, so I want every elven guard on the scene to make sure nothing unnatural occurs." The wise elven king was a fine and generous ruler. He had been ruling Daisfi for over 900 years, and for the average lifespan of an elf, 900 years is about 90 in human years. Duilvel was starting to head out through the main doors when El Elowin and Radian bumped into him. They both knelt down and bowed their heads in respect. "Your Majesty," El Elowin said. Radian, in the elven language, said, "Aizonai Laifie Okni Nikte." The elven king slowly nodded his head. When they got to their feet, Duilvel said, "Everything is ready for the big event tonight. My beautiful daughter Gallowin will be engaged to the finest elven warrior." "And who, might I ask, is this fine warrior?" El Elowin asked. "Why, the noble and honorable Anarion, of course, son of the general," said Duilvel. "Oh," said El Elowin, "you mean the same Anarion who nearly spent his entire life bragging about how awesome he is, and how he triumphantly took down an entire troop of goblins with a sword single-handedly?" A voice behind him answered, "Actually, it was a fleet of goblins, and you missed the part that I also had my eyes closed." Radian rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Well, don't forget that your precious Gallowin has been through more combat training than you." Anarion stepped into the palace entrance with a look of pride on his face. "So she's more experienced in the field. I bet with her by my side, we'll take down twice as many orcs in the Valley of Lost Souls." Duilvel chuckled and said, "No one has ventured to the Valley of Lost Souls in over a century. It would be best if you keep your head in the right place and stay out of trouble." El Elowin glanced at Anarion and asked, "Even if you could make it there, how would you plan to travel to the valley and come back to Dicefay alive? It's basically the gateway to death itself." Anarion laughed and said, "That's nothing a little transportation spell can't fix." "You would be killed even before you can complete the spell," said Radiant. Just then, one of the guards came through the door. I don't mean to intrude, your majesty, but the ceremony is about to begin. At sundown, everyone was in the village square waiting for Galawain to come down the aisle. Elwyn sat next to Redian and asked her, "So, I've never experienced an elven wedding before. How is this different from a human wedding?" Redian glanced at him. "Well, the bride and groom perform a special spell that takes half of their souls and fuses them together to create a nature spirit that contains the very essence of Daisfei and the infinite love that they will share with each other." Elwyn's eyes went wide in awe. "The downside is if the nature spirit's life is cut short, the newlywed souls, in this case Anarion and Galawain's, will lose their soul and die." Elwyn looked at Anarion at the altar and then back at Redian. "Anarion is the son of the general. He won't let harm come between her or Daisfei." Then, after the sun had set, the wedding began. The elves stood up and sang an ancient melody in the elven language. Elwyn then noticed that the leaves on the trees glowed, and from them blew small specks of bright blue buds that glowed with a luminescent aura. All the elven heads turned toward the clearing. There, wearing a bridal gown made of leaves and twigs, slowly walking down the aisle, was Galawain. She was slightly a little taller than Elwyn, and most presumably a few years older than him. She had long black hair that went down to the back of her shoulders, and her eyes were the color of a clear blue sky on a warm sunny day. When she went up at the altar, Duelville started the wedding. It took some time before the wedding reception kicked off. Elwyn and Redian sat at one end of the table in the great hall when the newlyweds stopped by at their table. "Attention!" shouted Anarion. Redian nearly spilled her drink on her dress and cried out, "By Cathello's beard, Anarion! This isn't a boot camp!" Galawain stood by her husband and snickered. Elwyn glanced up at her. "So, just out of curiosity, do either of you feel a little weird after half of your souls came out of your bodies?" "I feel just fine, considering my personality is the same," said Anarion. "Your personality is the thing that needed an upgrade," Redian said to herself. Galawain looked over her shoulder and whistled. From the floor rose up a transparent entity with horns on its head. It seemed to be about 3 feet tall, with what looked like the shape of butterfly wings growing from its back. From its face, 2 small bright dots glowed and looked at Galawain, which Elwyn took to be eyes. "So," said Redian, "I'm guessing that this is the nature spirit, the personification of our love, and the most precious creature in Relana," said Galawain. Elwyn touched the nature spirit with his hand, only for it to pass right through its torso. He flinched back and fell to the ground. "It's okay, Elwyn," said Redian. Galawain helped get him up to his feet and winked an eye at him. "Well, I suppose me and my wife should be getting ready to hit the hay," said Anarion. "We have a big day ahead of us." Redian and Galawain bowed to each other, and everyone emptied out of the great hall. Elwyn caught up to Redian, and they walked down toward the end of the walkway, when suddenly Redian gripped his hand. "Follow me. There's something I've been wanting to show you for a while now, but you have to keep this a secret. Do you understand?" Elwyn nodded, and followed her into the deep forest. A few minutes later they stepped into a clearing. A vast pond surrounded the area, as dust particles glowed by the moonlight. Around the pond, pixies and small creatures that looked like a cross between a ferret and a fox started chattering when they saw Redian. Elwyn had never seen a more gorgeous place in his life. "What is this place?" he asked. "This is a part of Daisfei that has been forgotten for centuries, and the only place where I can come and truly be myself," said Redian. Elwyn glanced at her and said, Nobody in the entire village knows about this place. Not even King Duelvel?" Redian shook her head. "Nope, nobody but yours truly." She smiled and winked at him. Elwyn felt very lucky to have a friend like Redian. She sometimes felt like she was the only other person in the world who truly understood him. "What do you mean when you said you can only be yourself here?" asked Elwyn. Redian sighed and lay down in the grass. "My father wants me to serve in the general's squad as an archer. He says it will be a good experience for me. But my passion has always been with magic. So when he makes me practice, I usually spend most of my time here, when he's not looking. If only he would understand. Elwyn put his hand on her shoulder. He may not understand, but I do, he said. She sat up, smiled, and took her hand in his. What would I do without you? Redian said. Elwyn smirked and helped her up. You would probably still be making quirky remarks about Anarion's oversized ego. They both chuckled and headed home. They said goodnight to each other, and both drifted off into a deep sleep.